localization is old news now, and I'm here really to talk about new things, things that I run into on a daily basis in my job as an account manager at Lionbridge. So yeah, this presentation really is my only presentation this year, and I wasn't planning on doing any one of them, but then Dammit asked me to come to St. Petersburg, and I've always been fascinated by the city, so I hope to see more of the city than just this hall. I'll try and speak slowly for the interpreters and get started. So first of all, the subject of my presentation is can language quality ever be good enough? And I think the speaker before me talked about acceptable quality, and that's really what this presentation is about. I mean, there we see a clear need, and at Lionbridge, in my daily job, I see a clear need for customers who require quality which isn't 100%, which is just usable. And this presentation deals with that. I mean, how do we deal with that from a translator perspective? I mean, how is this going to change the translation industry? What should we be getting ourselves ready for? So in a sense, it's a bit of a controversial topic, I guess, because I'm a translator myself, and I was taught, I learned in school to always aim for perfect quality. So now to talk about, acceptable quality or good enough quality or machine translation, it's sort of controversial, but I think there's it's also not a big opportunity, and I'll try and show you to that later. So to start the presentation with, I'm avoiding the cliché lost in translation here. I'm actually going to talk about translation and lost. Does anybody know the TV show called Lost? Okay, I see a few hands. Okay, well, about 2 years ago, my wife and I got completely addicted to it. I mean, once you see the one episode, you want to see the next, and then you want to see the next. Because it's all about a group of people, and their plane crashes on an island. They're all beautiful people, the plane crashes, and at the island something's wrong. I mean, they are stuck on the desert island, something's wrong, people get killed, people disappear, people act strangely. So there's a secret at the island, and whenever you've seen one episode, you want to go to the next. So we were watching this show every week, in front of television, and soon I found out that the show in the States, in America, was already ahead of what they were showing in Europe. So, and because I didn't want to really wait, one Google search further, I found the episode that was shown in the States on the internet somewhere, and you could download it. Even better, you could download it with subtitles, with Dutch subtitles. So we were watching the show, and on Tuesday evening it was shown in the States. Wednesday evening we were watching it in Amsterdam with Dutch subtitles. Perfect. Just one thing. I'll keep it to this picture, especially for the ladies in the room. There was a bit of a disadvantage there, because the subtitles were really bad. I mean, they were done by volunteers. They were done very quickly, and they contained, lots of spelling mistakes and typos and all kinds of, language terrorism. It was really bad. And I was sort of, being a translator, I was noticing that. I mean, I found it very annoying, to see all the mistakes, and that the translators completely missed, what was being said, etc. But then I asked my wife, like, don't you get annoyed by these bad subtitles? And she said, no, I think they're really useful. I think they're really helpful. And that, for me, that moment was really an eye-opener, that, okay, for some people, the language quality may not, even though it's not perfect, it's useful, it's acceptable, and it helps them. So good enough quality is something that does exist, and that can help people to understand certain things. So once I found out about the Dutch subtitles, I started wondering, who does this? I mean, who does these subtitles? I mean, they're clearly not professional translators. There must be somebody who is interested in doing these subtitles in their spare time for free. And I found out about a concept called fan subbing. And fan subbing is really a group of people who are crazy about a certain TV show or movie or animation type, and creating subtitles for that. Whoever tells you that Facebook invented crowdsourced translation was wrong. I mean, the fan subbing has already been going on since the 80s, especially with Japanese animations in the US. A lot of people really liked the Japanese animations, but couldn't understand them. So there were volunteers translating them, and of course it has become much easier to do it, but it's been around for a long time. Clearly, it's sort of semi-illegal, the fan subbing, because the subtitles enable illegal, downloads of movies. But I don't think, anyone has ever been prosecuted by creating translations for free. So it's something which is out there, and which it's quite a fascinating phenomenon actually, because they're professionalizing. I mean, I see in Holland, and I'm sure in Russia the same thing are happening. There's little groups of of students and people interested in languages doing these translations, and they are very quick. They're starting to organize them in junior translators, senior translators, and editors, and they can turn around translations within hours rather than days. I wanted to do a little test at a Dutch conference, I think about a year and a half ago. A conference like this, full of translators, and I wanted to see how bad are these subtitles really. So I showed them two versions. The official version, straight from the DVD, done by a professional subtitler, and then the pirate version, done by the volunteers. And I asked the audience, like, which one do you prefer? And interestingly enough, I mean, I think the split was about 30-70. 30% of the people thought the pirate version was good enough, was the best actually, which shows that even though volunteers and crowdsourcing and all that stuff are considered to be sort of subpar translation suppliers, I mean, it can become pretty quickly very, very good. And I think Facebook has proved that as well. So the whole crowdsourcing thing, especially in this environment, is something to reckon with, to recognize. So why do people actually use these subtitles? Well, mostly because they're good enough. They're good enough to understand what's going on. Even though linguistically they may not be perfect, they bring across the message. So the whole good enough thing that I keep coming back to was really sort of explained best, I think, in an article in a magazine called Wired in 2009. Somebody wrote an article about the good enough revolution. The good enough revolution meaning that not everything has to be perfect. Sometimes it's good to sort of to have less perfect quality in exchange for immediacy, to have something available right away. I mean, it's quite amazing if you think of it that we're currently sort of looking at little, very badly recorded videos on YouTube. I mean, we're listening to music in MP3, which is highly compressed. We're reading the news on Twitter in like 140 characters. We're reading the latest news instead of from real journalists. So the world is changing, and Wired saw this as a revolution, which I think is worded maybe a bit too strongly, but it's still something that is really happening. So the good enough revolution, what does it mean for us in translation? And this is a pyramid that I thought was actually quite interesting. It was published by Common Sense Advisory about a year ago as well. And it sort of shows the translation landscape. I mean, at the very top is what we do for a living, right? I mean, that's what we do every day. We translate products, we translate marketing materials, websites, all that kind of stuff. The only thing acceptable there is good quality. Right, and where we measure that, we have metrics for that to measure quality. And then at the very bottom, there's suggesting engines. There's Google, there's Microsoft, and all the other ones that provide free machine translation. And that's really for consumer use. I mean, for people who want to, quickly have an idea about a translation from a website or an email or a chat session or whatever. There's a whole world in the middle. There's a whole world in the middle of content, like, support content from companies, from user-generated content, Twitter feeds, blogs, forums, all that kind of stuff, which really should be translated, but currently is not. And it's not currently translated because it's simply too expensive. I mean, the volumes are too huge. I mean, there's you may have heard about the content explosion. I mean, there's way too many words for human translators to deal with. So our customers, as translation companies, as language service providers, are asking for a solution for this middle piece. I mean, how do we deal with this? I mean, our customers are having to do more words with less money, and there has to be a solution to turn around all these words for less money. A picture of SDL, our main competitor, shows pretty much the same story. I mean, they show it as an iceberg. I mean, only the top is translated. At the very bottom, there's a huge opportunity for more translation, for more words that have to be translated. The only thing about that opportunity is that it cannot be following the traditional translation models. We cannot use traditional translation to deal with that huge amount of content. Another picture which shows a very similar image, it's from Asia Online. It was mentioned this morning, Asia Online, very active in machine translation. They also sort of pictured the existing market at the top. The products, the user interface, the documentation, and at the very bottom, the new markets. I mean, again, they see it as an opportunity, new markets, and in those new markets, the keyword's going to be good enough quality, acceptable quality, and quick and real-time turnaround of translations. So how do we get there as translation companies? I mean, how can we work with this new requirement? And I think we're struggling. I was very happy that Renato said this morning that, those who are very confident about predictions about the future are usually wrong. Well, I'm also very confused. I mean, I'm dealing with completely new questions from my customers. I mean, 10 years ago, I would get a question, we have this software product, it needs to be localized, or we have this website that needs to be translated. Right now, I'm getting questions like, ooh, we've just outsourced our entire customer support team to India. We've promised our customers across the world in every language customer support reactions in 2 hours. So we have to have translations in whatever language combination, whatever comes in, within a couple of hours instead of days or weeks. So it's a completely new world. I mean, one of the largest projects I've worked on last year was a good enough project, where one of my customers said, we have 30 million words that have to be translated for regulatory purposes. We have to give it to regulatory bodies in the States to read it. Problem is, it's in 30 plus languages. So what can you do for me without making this, a huge, expensive undertaking? Another good example actually was last week on Twitter. Somebody from WikiLeaks mentioned that they are planning to translate all of the documents that have been leaked by WikiLeaks. I think it's 100 million words, and of course there's no budget. So they're looking again at machine translation. For that type of content, good enough quality is sufficient. So how do we get there? I mean, first of all, of course, machine translation. It's the keyword. I mean, we have the gisting engines that, Google and Microsoft that give you sort of an idea, but I think the general impression is that it's not good enough. I mean, it's good for some, consumer purposes, but in a business environment, it's simply not good enough. So the next step after the gisting engines like Microsoft and Google is to customize your MT engine, your machine translation engine. You feed it with terminology, you feed it with rules, you feed it with data, you feed it with customer-specific data, and then the quality automatically improves. I mean, it has to improve. And as and both Lionbridge and SDL have come out with products last year that do just that. I mean, that put an additional layer on top of machine translation. Then the post-editing question, how much post-editing are you going to do? I mean, are you just going to do a quick post-edit, or are you going to do a full post-edit like they do in the European Union, to get final publishable quality? For good enough quality, there's different levels of post-editing that you can do. I mean, a very light post-edit could be sufficient in some cases. So and then on human translation, I mean, I've already given the example of the subtitling. I mean, you can go and investigate crowdsourcing. I have customers that tell me we have a very involved user base, and we want to somehow involve them in translations. So not maybe to produce all the translations, but maybe for quality control or to help to validate the terminology, those kind of things. I mean, the internet has made it really possible to involve a huge community of people in translation programs, much more than before. You can look at maybe using non-native speakers. I mean, I know it's again controversial, but it does happen. When in some cases when the content is suitable for it. You can look at using students. You can look at maybe skipping some QA steps. I mean, how do you get the good enough quality? I mean, I'm struggling with it. I think everybody's struggling with it. And interestingly enough, I haven't seen a single translation company that offers what, for example, airlines offer. At the very right, you see a picture, you can book first class, you can book economy class, you pay for what you get. Very few translation companies actually do that. I mean, we translate, we translate legal, we translate marketing, we translate, medical content, but I haven't yet seen a translation company that says we can offer you different levels of quality. And I think that's going to be a next step that has to happen. We cannot continue to provide perfect quality in all circumstances. So the question is, I mean, can we get to this sort of quality menu? Can we tell our customers, like, if you pay 100% of the rate, we give you perfect quality. For 50%, we give you half quality. I think it's going to be difficult, because I think it's almost impossible for a translator to tell a translator, like, tomorrow I want you to produce less quality than you usually do. I mean, it's very difficult to accomplish that. So I think rather about thinking in a quality menu, I think we should look at something like this. A production model menu. Really, I mean, a translation company should be a waiter coming to a customer like, you have this problem, how do you want us to fix it? I mean, we can give you this, we can give you that, and with every solution, every production model, there's a price. And this is just an example. I mean, this is definitely not Lionbridge policy or my policy. This is just some ideas I had about how to come to a menu like that. I mean, you can start with the very cheapest, with the generic machine translation, what Google does, and Microsoft. You can go to crowdsourcing, where most of translations are done by volunteers. You can have the custom machine translation, and based on all of these production models, the price increases. Starting, of course, with the baseline, which is just what we do today, translation and linguistic review. Just to give an example, I mean, the translation and linguistic review, that's what we normally do, right? The TEP process, translation, edit, proof. I recently had a customer who does a lot of marketing translations, and we do marketing translations for them, and we were doing all of those quality checks. I mean, we translate, we edit, and we proofread, especially with marketing. It's very sensitive. But what we found next is that our customers sent our translations to their in-country offices, and the in-country offices pretty much rewrote them. I mean, they started changing away, and doing things. And we realized, why should we really produce perfect linguistic quality when the end result is going to be rewritten anyway? So we agreed with the client that for less money, we would just do a translation. We don't do any linguistic review, and their in-countries would be the final owners of the translations. Everybody happy. It's an example of good enough quality. Of course, you also have the premium. I mean, if you're going into a translation, for example, medical translations, you're asking a doctor or a medical expert to do a review, a subject matter review, you get into additional costs on top of regular translations. But something like this is, I think, where the industry is going and needs to go, to give more flexibility in what we actually do. I'd like to conclude with 2 slides. This one came out last week. TAUS is an organization dealing with machine translation and data sharing, and they gave 7 predictions for the translation industry. 3 of them I thought were quite interesting. First one, I think we've heard it this morning, NT is here to stay. People who were born in the 40s, I mean, have seen NT coming up and down, and it's somehow disappeared every time again, but I think this time it's really here to stay. I agree with them. The second thing, which is, I think, very good news, and maybe related to the first one, I mean, the more poor translations people see coming out of those engines, the more people might appreciate high-quality translation. I mean, those gisting engines like Microsoft and Google, they do prove that translation is really more difficult than just putting some words, in another language. There's more to it. So I think this is a very positive consequence as well, and a very positive prediction. And the last one really relates to what I've just talked about. Translation has to become a business of choices. I mean, not just for translators, but also for our customers. Translators should be, and I think we've also heard that this morning, translators should have and already have the choice to continue working in traditional mode, just producing high quality translations, or to start, playing around with machine translation. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities there, and with other tools to increase productivity and to maybe make more money. So I think even though it's 7th prediction from TAUS, I think it probably should have been the first one, because it's good news. I think there's a lot of opportunities for different roads to take for translators these days. So because I know that every presentation there's like 3 or 4 takeaways, I'd like to end with this one. First of all, only your customer or the end user decides what good enough quality is. I mean, it started with my wife and I disagreeing on quality. I mean, to me, the subtitles were unacceptable, and she thought they were great and very helpful. So as an industry, we cannot really define what quality is, because our customers are the only person who can define that. Good enough quality is increasingly accepted and increasingly necessary. In exchange for speed and convenience. I mean, if you have to turn around translations in hours, I mean, it may be that you cannot do all the quality controls that you normally do. New translation models, production models are required to meet this growing demand. And finally, I find that some agencies, especially the larger ones, are slowly moving towards this more flexible model, towards going to a menu where they afford their customers to pick what they want, rather than a one-for-all. So I hope that I've been clear in this presentation, because this was it, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not sure if I'm on time. Demi? Okay. Thank you.